Good evening and welcome to the March 11th, 2013 meeting of the Town of Scarborough Planning Board. Could you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Carol, could you...
stays open.
Thank you. Could you please take the roll?
Mr. Bouffard, Mr. Chamberlain, Ms. Corthell.
Here.
Mr. Fellows.
Here.
Mr. Mazur.
Here.
Mr. Paul. Mr. Thomas.
Here. Thank you. And given the absences this evening, all four of us who are here will be voting members tonight. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 19th, 2013 meeting. I'll be abstaining from this since I was not at that meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Do a second? All in favor? Thank you. Show that to be 3-0. Item number 4. The Planning Board will conduct a public hearing to receive input on the proposed amendments to Chapter 405, the Town of Scarborough zoning ordinance to establish a light industrial district and a rural and farming overlay district. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Vice Chairman. Dan Bacon, Town Planner. It's good to be here. I'm actually going to provide a presentation on both items 4 and 5 together. Obviously, they're separate public hearings, but they're part of the same proposal. And this is a proposed zone change to create a light industrial zone in the Holmes Road area. It's an initiative the Long Range Planning Committee has been working on for a number of months now. It's been to the council for their first reading and their public hearing. It's here before you for public hearing this evening, and then back to the town council for second reading, most likely next Wednesday at their regular scheduled meeting. And a new light industrial area is proposed because the comp plan and SEDCO, or Economic Development Group, have really highlighted a lack of available industrial space and land in Scarborough at this point. Muzzy Road area is almost built out. Industrial area off Pleasant Hill Road is virtually entirely occupied, as is the industrial park. So Scarborough has current and future demand for this type of space. And it's important that it's close to transportation routes. So that's why this area has been identified for future light industrial growth. And by this area, I mean the area vicinity of Holmes Road and Two Rod Road and the Maine Turnpike, which I'll present on a map in a minute. The committee studied this area for, like I said, since last summer. SEDCO's been providing a lot of input and direction on the various uses that should be in this zone, and we've had 3 different neighborhood meetings to present various proposals to the property owners in this area, make adjustments, and have come up with the proposal that I'm presenting this evening that's in your packages. So the area in question is sort of a triangular shaped area between Holmes Road, Two Rod Road, and the Maine Turnpike. It's quite close to Payne Road, quite close to exit 42 in terms of access to key roadways. It's currently made up of the Beechwood Speedway and the parking areas and the land owned by the Speedway. The town's old landfill is within this area. Scarborough Auto Parts, an auto salvage operation is here. A fair amount of undeveloped land, and then some 6 or 7 residential properties along Two Rod Road. This map shows the current zoning in the area. The bright red is our B2 zone, a regional business zone. That applies to roughly 2/3 of the proposed area to be rezoned. It applies to most of the Speedway, the town's landfill, Scarborough Auto Parts, and then some surrounding land. The zone that's in green is our rural and farming zone, and that applies to the more southerly properties between Two Rod Road and the Maine Turnpike. This map shows the proposed zone change. In purple is the proposed light industrial district that would apply to this area. In addition to the light industrial district, the more southerly properties between Two Rod Road and the Maine Turnpike are also proposed to have a rural and farming overlay district apply to them, which I'll explain a little later in the presentation. So that's another element of this zone change. One of the key pieces to this proposed zone change is to make sure light industrial zone is applied to the areas and that it fits into this area. Like I said, it is already partially commercially zoned, but there are some residential properties within the district and then adjacent to the district. So that was an important factor in coming up with the zoning district. So in terms of the key elements to fit into the area, it's important that the light industrial zone is structured so that it doesn't need public water and sewer. There aren't current plans to extend public water and sewer by the town, as it's currently east of the turnpike. The closest property is Skin Road. Another key element was to focus access and truck traffic to Holmes Road, which is more capable of handling heavier trucks, light industrial type traffic, and not allow that kind of traffic onto Two Rod Road, which is certainly a more residential street. It's not set up for that type of traffic. Another key element is to really try to minimize impacts to the Two Rod Road residences in the Two Rod Road corridor. And lastly, to provide some options to these Two Rod Road properties, particularly the residential properties, so that they don't necessarily need to be developed industrially, that they have some options to stay residential or convert to more industrial type activities. In terms of the light industrial zone, a pretty wide range of industrial type uses are proposed to be allowed: manufacturing, assembly, research, warehousing, auto repair, heavy equipment repair and sales, things of that nature. The zone also proposes to allow some commercial type uses, like smaller offices, personal services, instructional type uses, and that's particularly geared towards enabling those residential properties to have some options for conversion along Two Rod Road. In terms of the permitted uses, there are some that aren't allowed in this area, particularly ones that are likely to generate more wastewater or need a fair amount of water supply, like food processing, et cetera, because this area does not have those public utilities. In terms of access, I mentioned the requirement to have industrial uses access only Holmes Road, so that's within the zone as a performance standard. And only small-scale non-residential uses and residential uses would be allowed to have access to Two Rod Road to protect that neighborhood and that road. And as part of that, connections between properties in order to provide access to Holmes Road are going to be strongly encouraged. When a project comes into the planning board and, say, has frontage on Holmes Road, it's going to be important to give a lot of thought to providing future connections and access to some of those landlocked properties that either don't have frontage today on any roads or only have access to Two Rod Road. This aerial helps kind of illustrate where those properties are, particularly the ones in the lower area of the proposed zone where they currently only have access to Two Rod Road. So those would need some cooperation and some access through either the Speedway property, the town property, or Scarborough Auto Parts to get access to Holmes Road. Another measure to protect the residential properties on Two Rod Road and outside the zoning district are some buffering standards. 100-foot wooded buffers would be required from the industrial uses to abutting residences or residential zones. 25-foot buffer strip is proposed along Two Rod Road if some of those homes are converted into non-residential uses, so that across the street, which is remaining residential, has some some buffering and protection from any changes of use there. There's also buffer requirements to Two Rod Road, the Maine Turnpike, and Holmes Road to allow for this industrial activity, but to require it to be shielded and buffered from those roadways. Earlier, I mentioned options for the Two Rod Road properties, and the residential lots that are proposed in the light industrial zone. In the zoning, some options have been written in for them. They can remain residential and continue as they are today. They could convert to small non-residential uses like offices and personal services, smaller contractor space, and they can have access to Two Rod Road for their driveway and getting in and out. Or they can choose to become industrial and then work with the property behind them to get access to Holmes Road. So we've tried to structure this so that they can take advantage of the zone or remain as they are today. The more southerly properties that are proposed to be in the light industrial zone with the overlay, the rural and farming overlay, also have options. They can remain RF and continue to be residential, or perhaps have some light farming, or develop, if there's subdivision potential, they could develop into an RF subdivision if they choose, or they can choose to convert to light industrial and develop per the light industrial rules, again with access to Holmes Road and again with buffering. So those property owners have that option through the overlay coupled with the light industrial zone. And again, these properties I'm referring to are in the lower segment of the proposed zoning districts. So with that really summarizes what's proposed in terms of zoning in this area. I'm certainly happy to get into more details if the board has questions about any aspects, or the public does, on any details or aspects of the zoning proposal.
Thanks, Dan. This time I will open it up to a public hearing. I'll just ask that if you would like to speak, you approach the podium, state your name and address, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes. The public hearing is open. All right. Not seeing any takers, I will close the public hearing. And Dan or Jade, do you have any preference or recommendation as to whether we have board discussion of these separately, or wait until you give your presentation on the map component of this and have it all at once? I mean, obviously in practice it tends to all get wrapped up together.
Well, I've given my presentation on both together, so I think you're welcome to give your responses on both, and if you're comfortable with that.
All right, thank you. We'll turn to board discussion then, and start down with Ron.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I think what you need is just see if anybody's got any comments from the board. I mean, I think the Long Range Planning Committee did a good job. They worked hard, read through this, and I've got no problems with it.
Good, thanks. Jeff?
Well, I think it makes sense. I think we need to look for other areas for development, and it makes sense in this area, along with the blend with the overlay, so I'm supportive of it.
Thank you. Carrie?
I commend the Long Range Planning Committee for the work they're doing. I think that the light industrial is a great match for most of what's there, and I like the options that are given to the residences with the RF overlay and the options, so I'm fine with it.
Thank you. I also support this. I was impressed with the balanced approach that the Long Range Planning Committee took, and the incorporation of public input, and it's sort of a nuanced approach that, as Dan explained, sort of takes into account the different nature of different portions of this area, and that some has sort of a little bit more of a rural or almost residential character, and allows for sort of a transition there. So I would also commend the Long Range Planning Committee and add my support to this, and the board will be sending along a positive opinion. Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome.
Moving on, item number 6. We just completed 4 and 5. Item number 6, Biddeford Savings Bank requests plan development review for a mixed-use development for a property at 206 US Route 1. Jay?
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chairman. As board members may recall, this is a continuation of a discussion the board began back in late January to go through the plan development review process in the TVC district. At that meeting, the board had, just for the board and public's edification, the plan development review process is a 3-stage process. There's a site inventory component, which the board dealt with in January, which leads to a master plan component. And once the master plan is approved by this board, then we'll move to a site planning, really the details of the site plan. The purpose of the master plan component of the plan development process is to conceptually come up with the general design and layout of what a lot may look like in general terms. Again, as I suggested, once that's approved, the applicant will come back with refined materials for the site plan approval. Get into more of the details of stormwater, lighting, and those significant details that need to be touched on. Let's see, so back in January when the board began the master plan review process, the board had asked the applicant to provide a few additional concepts of how the layout of the site may work. The general issues, primary concerns that were raised by the board were about traffic circulation and coordination of the drive-through activities. I think the board was principally interested in trying to minimize the aesthetics of drive aisles, if you will, between the buildings and Route 1. And I know the applicant has prepared at least one concept plan that seeks to do that at the board's direction, among some others. So at this point, the board members will have received, I believe it's 5 different conceptual plans, which the applicant has done a nice job of providing a narrative, sort of laying out what they see as far as the pros and cons in meeting the plan development provisions of the ordinance. And staff's reviewed those, and we typically agree that the traditional layout and second driveway designs really don't go far enough in meeting the plan development scenarios. And so alternatives A, 1A, and 1 all meet to various degrees the plan development standards. And I think the board will need to work in terms of how those balance the environmental sensitivities of the site that we heard about through the site inventory process, as well as the development form and scale, how it meets with the provisions of the ordinance. Let's see, so before I turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, board members may recall this item is adjacent to the Centervale Farm property, which the board's actually actively reviewing through the site plan review process. And there's some discussion at the last meeting, though we didn't get to this application due to the lateness of the hour. We did have a discussion with the folks at Centervale Farm about cross-access between these two sites. And so I'm sure the applicant is prepared to speak to that a little bit, but staff was able to convene a meeting with the two developers. It's actually right after our last meeting due to scheduling conflicts, and we think we have a good basis for beginning a discussion and resolution for the Centervale site and a beginning of a discussion with these folks. So with that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jay. And I will turn over to the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Mike Ian, and I'm working as a consultant with Biddeford Savings Bank. We have our president here tonight and CEO, Charles Peterson. And as you know, we're located about a mile down the road now, and because of access, we'd prefer much to be on the site across from Hannaford. So that's why we've been in here for the last 2 or 3 months working with staff. Tom Gorel is here tonight to answer any traffic questions you might have, and Andrew is going to step us through the various plans that we were asked the last time to think outside the box, We were asked to try to get the drive-through on the back and various other things, so I think Andrew's done a pretty nice job with doing that, and I think probably I'll just turn it over to him at this point and let him go through his scenarios, and then if you have any questions from any of us, we'd be glad to try to answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Johnston. I'm a senior civil engineer with SMRT, and as Mike said, we've been helping with the design and permitting of this. I think we lost the roaming mic, so I'm going to pull this one around this way and just talk through some of these plans on the alternatives analysis. Firstly, what we're aiming to do from the start of this is to do two things. One is to provide a functional, accessible and attractive site design that obviously attracts people to the site and attracts people to the uses on the site. Secondly, we've been looking at the Scarborough commercial design standards and trying to apply those as we do in this district. For that reason, when we first made a submission on this, we came up with 4 different layouts that we had looked at. We had looked at a number of other ones, and the rather sketchy looking one up here is one of those. We had, as I said, looked at a number of others. Some of those were dismissed fairly early on, as this one was, as being either unfeasible or impractical. One of the first things that we did is we did think outside the box. One of the comments that came from the planning board at the last meeting was, couldn't we have people just come right into the site, go right through the drive-throughs, and then take on the back of the buildings, and then take 2 lefts and go out of the site? And that's similar to this layout, only the roads work the other way around. And I actually started doing the one with the 2 lefts on the way out, and it seemed very natural to me coming in this way through the drive-throughs down here. Of course, where I learned to drive, the steering wheel's on the right-hand side of the car, which would have worked very well for that. Somebody very kindly in my office tapped me on the shoulder and pointed out the fact that the steering wheel's on the other side of the car here. So this is what we ended up with for the initial take on getting rid of the lane at the front, and what would happen if we just brought people into the site, came in a rear loop road through the drive-throughs and out. That creates a lot of conflicts between pedestrian traffic, parked vehicles and people trying to get into the building, backing into parking lanes, and also creates this large amount of additional wetland impact towards the back of the site. And I'll just go through some of these. They're circled in orange. You can see out here, in order to get the parking numbers up to where they were on our initial site plan, we're kind of forcing elements in here. We end up with a lot of parking on the other side of the drive aisle from the buildings, people having to walk across this main drive aisle to get into the buildings. We end up with what is essentially not circulation between some of these parking areas, 2 dead-end parking areas to try to get them proximate to the front doors. And eliminating that drive lane really eliminates a lot of the good efficiency that we get out of circulation. And one of the other things I will mention, after we looked at this and we looked at a couple of other options, we also took a trip around Scarborough and looked at just about every drive-through bank actually in Scarborough. Looked at the aerial photographs and the layout, and what we found common to all of those bar one in the town was all of them have circulation lanes that go all the way around the building. The only one exception is Gorham Savings Bank over in the Hannaford Plaza, and that actually has a road which you enter from on this side, and it has a parallel road on the other side of it, so you can drive right through and get out to the other road. And that's the only one that didn't have the lane going all the way around the building. So we did look at that, and we did look at a couple of other options as well. Going back to the drawing board, and we tidied some of these up because we thought it was appropriate to do so, the 4 basic layouts. As Jay said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because they don't really fit in very well with commercial design standards. The traditional layout, parking at the front of the building set back from the street, it does create a fairly efficient circulation. In fact, if you notice on this, the use of space of the site to create the same function is actually smaller. But what you do is you distance the building from the street, You get this mass of parking, you don't get that pedestrian connection, you don't get that scale of the buildings being proximate to the street. So efficient as it is, it really doesn't fit into those design standards. The second one we looked at was, as Jay said, the second driveway. I've got so many of these, I think I've lost it. Nope, there it is. And that again works fairly efficiently. What we've done is we've added a driveway right turn into the site here, bringing people around the back. We've tried to get parking alongside the building. The circulation is a little confusing here, but what really concerns us about this is this right turn in. And really, from my standpoint, this is not a design that I would propose as being viable, simply because, and having worked on other sites in this area, that right turn in, what you're creating there is almost an attractive hazard. There is no good way of designing that to be efficient for people to turn right in and completely blocking any chance of people turning left in. Put a coffee shop there with a drive-through on it, you know people are going to try and turn left on Route 1 into that. And that, to my mind, writes off that as an alternative just purely on that safety aspect. We do have a controlled entrance at the light, and we would much prefer that to be the only entrance to the site. The two options that brings us back to are fairly close in layout to what you saw in the original master plan submission. There are a couple of notable changes to that. One is, there was a very good point made in the our master plan submission review early on, was that we didn't line the driveway up with the Hannaford Road driveway. What we've done is looked at the existing driveway that's there now that used to serve the old Nickerson house down here, and we lined up our driveway with that. After the board's comment, Tom looked at that and also gave us some feedback and said, you know, you really want left turns, you don't want a separate left turn signal for this and for this. They're going to be going at the same time, so they have to be lined up so there isn't a conflict there. So we've moved that over a little bit. It squeezes the site in a bit, but that's one of the changes we made. The other one was, we had explained in the master plan submission, we went backwards and forwards with continuing this lane between the two functions here. And what we heard at the master plan, and after we thought about it again, that does get a little confusing, and it can also lead to a tailback in this area here. And the circulation actually works better with people coming around the two separate uses. It gives us a little more landscaping, and it makes that lane a little less obvious as well from the street. So this was our first take on it. The other thing to note here is we do have a bypass lane outside on the bank now, and a bypass lane outside the coffee shop, and that may extend a little further back, and, you know, as we develop this plan further on. We kind of liked this. It gave us a lot of outdoor seating. It gave us a lot of good pedestrian connectivity. The only downside on this that we saw from a circulation standpoint was this area down here, where you've got the traffic coming out of the drive-through, and you've got potential traffic coming in to park in here or backing out of these parking spaces. That, as an overall layout and as an aesthetic layout, we like this one. But that is kind of hard to take with that little conflict down in that end. Everything else works very smoothly. And that's where we progressed on to what we consider to be the preferred option, which puts a little more parking up in here, but it gets rid of that conflict and it makes this area work more smoothly. In that, with this being angled parking, people are only ever going to be able to get into this parking by coming around the building and stopping in here. So you don't have opposing traffic down here. So it gets rid of that conflict. Otherwise, the elements are the same up here. We have the stormwater at the back, the little pedestrian plaza which will serve the bank but could also potentially serve folks coming in from Route 1 as a little overlook down to the woodland and the wetland area to the rear. We beefed up some plantings around here, realizing that this is going to probably be where the ordering function is for the drive-through, so we really want to make that as well screened as we possibly can. And we show the connection to the abutting property, and that's another one which we did look at a number of options on. What we see, the two critical elements of that are the chief benefit of that connection between these two sites is to get folks from the abutting property out to the light so they can make a safe left turn onto Route 1. There are obviously other advantages to linking these sites just generally as a planning goal to try and link these sites. One of the things that's a little difficult or makes it a little less easy to do on this site is this is such a mainstay building, it's such a focus for people. It's a large, it's a well-placed building, and the entrance to that is not very obvious, or would not be very obvious because of the woods in this area, to people driving along Route 1. They're going to see this building and see the big sign, and the entrance is still being up here. So we don't see it as being a tremendous advantage to have people being able to enter the site through here. The big disadvantage of letting people enter the site through there is that if you have people coming out of the drive-throughs queuing at the light, you go 1, 2, 3 cars back, and you've blocked that entry in. Now, people then turning in from Route 1 wanting to turn left in here. You get one guy coming in, wants to turn left in there. You've got 3 cars queued at the light waiting to get out. He can't move and turn left, and you go 1, 2, 3 cars back, and you're back in Route 1. And that, to my mind, is not a good design. We've looked at alternatives at punching this through in different areas. It really starts to impact then the circulation on this site next door, because doing this, we can actually get people in conveniently, in a visible way, get them in to the light in a way that lines up with this aisle and is a very convenient, very obvious connection. As we start going back down, we start running into, this becomes a less obvious connection, becomes very much less obvious to people who are parking up here to try and get out to the light. You have to come round the building to do it. And you still don't fully eliminate the possibility of folks queuing to get out at the light here, blocking somebody turning left here and backing traffic back up onto Route 1. And that's one of the things, particularly with drive-throughs and particularly with those peak loads, we've been so careful about having the stacking lanes and the stacking distances in here to make sure that the queuing doesn't impact anything else. To create a situation there where potentially you could create a queue that backs out onto Route 1, we see as being a big disadvantage. So that's the reasoning behind this. We did discuss it with, as Jay said, in the meeting with the abutting property owner. We think that that is the big advantage to this, is to get people out to the light here and provide some connectivity between the two. We don't see it as being a big advantage to provide a two-way connection between the two. So I hope that explains the circulation, our thoughts behind the circulation. I'm sure there'll be more questions and more discussion, but I think I've done enough talking for a bit, so I'll hand it over to someone else.
Just like to make a couple.
Thank you.
Just a couple of comments. We didn't redraw this in rendering, but we do have a smaller version of it. If you see where the yellow little piece of this area here, we've actually taken out one of the drive-throughs, so the bank is going to basically look, if you just take that drive-through out and you pull that over, it's not going to be as prominent, and it's not shown on this site either, so that's going to be gone. There's just going to be a little bit of an overhang, and I have smaller versions of the plan here if you'd like to see it, but that's the only way that was going to work. So we're putting the ATM is actually going to be right on the building, and that way we'll be able to have just 2 lanes in the bypass. And as far as the traffic goes and the comments that we've seen from Bill Bray and working with Jay, if there's something that Tom can do to look at that when we're doing the traffic, we'll certainly look at that. It's just that based on Tom's comments after the meeting and a few more comments since then, he wasn't quite sure that was the direction it was going to go in, but again, Tom is here, and I'd like him to address any questions, or maybe he can say a couple of comments to that. Tom?
Yeah, good evening, Tom Gorel with Gorel Palmer. Yeah, Bill Bray did provide some well-thought-out comments, as he usually does, and we haven't really done a traffic impact study for this yet, so those are really things that we'll address in the future. But I think Andrew did a pretty good job of outlining the connection issues. Primarily, we were concerned. I think Bill, in his comment, I'm kind of inferring from his comment that he would like it actually to be pushed back into the site so that he could have a two-way interconnection. And that's really the trade-off here. I think if you can get it further into the site, then the conflicts that Andrew talked about are less of an issue. If it's going to be closer to Route 1, certainly within 50 or 60 feet, then you do run that risk of the left turn into the site being, blocked, which would affect Route 1. So just so you understand potentially how the traffic here is supposed to work, the lining up of the driveway with the Hannaford Drive is important for a big reason, and that is the way the light's set up. Obviously, you service Hannaford Drive right now for exiting traffic as well as the traffic that enters turning left in. Well, we are actually going to take advantage of that phasing and not really have or introduce any additional delay, we hope, to that light, because while the left turn is happening into Hannaford, the left turn can actually happen into this site as well. So that really doesn't require any more time. The left turn into Hannaford's a bit heavier. Likewise, as you make an exit to left out of the site, the left out of Hannaford is also happening. So you would hope that we could take advantage of those phases, and since our traffic volumes are less, there really wouldn't be much of an impact. That's all keyed on lining it up, so that's why that was important, as Andrew said. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you. Do you have
That's it
anything
from
else?
us.
Or- Okay.
Nope. We'll open up to you.
All right, thank you. Jeff? Oh,
Good. I just have a questions before Jeff, excuse me. I just want to get this straight, making sure I have it before the questions come. So you're saying everybody would come in at the light,
Yes.
okay, and circle the way I see it here?
Yep.
But you're proposing that there not be the connection with the abutter up at the top because of what you enumerated, is that correct?
Right. What we're suggesting is that connection just be an exit from the abutting property to the light,
Okay, but not an entrance.
not an entrance to their property from the light.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Jeff.
This is I think it's a great pattern. Definitely an improvement from what we've seen. I can understand the connectivity to the building next door. If we just can't make it work, we can't make it work. I understand the stacking concept behind all that. I like the fact that you do not have the circle around both buildings and you have the separation. It just got to be too confusing with traffic, and I think that we were going to have the problems that you brought forward. The landscaping, I'll be curious to see what it looks like eventually, but the idea of buffering the drive-up area for ordering, great catch. The perpendicular versus angle parking, I think no matter what, you're going to have issues there. But you're probably going to need some signage or something somehow, because I just see people that are bypassing the drive-through, picking up some speed and circling around that backside, but you could probably solve that with some signage. So one thing I don't see with the diagonal parking is how are you going to get traffic back and forth to the building across there? Because you got traffic walking out into the roadway.
Yeah, I think we'd definitely want to add a crosswalk, and I don't think we have one shown on the plan there right now. And to answer the other question, I think there will be some parking on the site assigned to staff, and I think that would predominantly be that angled parking, the stuff towards the rear of the building there.
And that's a
Stuff that's
great
less
idea.
accessible.
That might be a condition of what we present, because then that solves the problem of who's back there parking and backing in and out.
Right.
It's an excellent pickup, Andrew, thank you. I just see this as a huge win-win, and with that addition, that's even that much better. I'm assuming that far left-hand bottom corner is your dumpster that's screened in there?
Yes, it is. That's where we're proposing it right now. And there may be some discussion, frankly, there'll still be some discussion on site layout issues and the exact formation of the areas around here, obviously with the proposed tenant. So, they'll have a say on some of that
Is
stuff.
that going to serve both? Would that be for one location only?
I believe that the proposed tenant for this building will want their own.
Okay.
The bank at the moment, not sure whether we really need a separate dumpster for the bank, but we'll look into that, certainly.
Like I said, from what you've presented, I see this as a real win-win. It's too bad we can't pick up the connectivity, but I also understand the stacking issues, and that's a huge pickup. The connectivity with the traffic light is only going to make it less confusing for the public going in and out, and it will also make it easier for you folks to process. So I see this as the option to go with especially with the condition of parking for the staff out back and a crosswalk for them. Great job, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron, did you have anything else?
No, I just want to echo what my colleague just said, and I just wanted to get it clear, and you did clarify. I also understand the inability to have the connectivity between the two. It would have been ideal if it could have worked, but obviously it doesn't, and I do definitely like the new flow better than we had seen previously. So I think you're certainly in the right direction. And I also would echo that if you made those diagonal parking staff, it would eliminate a lot of unnecessary pedestrian walkage. I mean, the staff is still at risk here a little bit too. We understand that, but it'd be a lot less walking traffic. And I think there's enough room proposed where you would have enough parking and enough walkability for customers to not have to go into that particular area. So I'm looking forward to the next step, and hopefully we can get this closed off in the near future. I think from what I'm reading on my notes, a lot of it's going to be the coordination of the lighting and all of that on the corner with whomever. So I say let's move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron? Carrie?
I have to echo my colleagues. I love the changes, the additional landscaping, the change in the flows. I just want to make sure that I understand on the connectivity. I understand how a two-way connectivity there would be a mess. I understand how people coming out from there would be a mess. I'm trying to understand how traffic coming in and one way into the Centerville would be.
Well, what we're proposing here is that traffic would just come out of the edge of the light.
Okay, and you'd like that even with the potential for backing up?
Well, here,
That's what I'm trying to understand.
here you don't really have a conflict. See, you may have traffic queuing to get out here.
Right.
These guys may have to wait to get out there. But you're not blocking traffic, and you're certainly not, the danger with this coming in here, blocking, you're actually going to back up onto Route 1. The worst thing that can happen here is that people are waiting to get out of here.
No, if it's one way going in there.
It's just coming out.
That's what you've got there, but I'm just trying to think, if it's one way in,
You have the same problem. You see, what you run up against is folks queuing to get out of the light from this site.
okay.
They're going to queue here, and they're going to block the entrance here. They'll be sitting here waiting at the light. And then when folks come in, one guy tries to turn left in here, you can't turn left because it's blocked. And you've got 1, 2, 3 people who are right behind it back out to Route 1.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that in my mind. No, I like all the changes. I'm in support of, with my colleagues.
Thanks, Carrie.
Corey, if I might, just to speak to sort of the coordination with the abutting site a little bit, if you don't mind. One of the sort of parameters that we ran into in our meeting was really the location on where this site joins into Centervale is very limited based on the existing built environment of the Centervale building as well as the natural constraints behind that building, as the board, will likely recall from our reviews of that. It's all wetlands back there. So really for all practical purposes, there's a small range of area where you could really make that connection. So that was sort of one of the fixed parameters, so to speak. And so based off of that is where, I think the applicant and with the traffic engineer have tried to come up with the best sort of solution off of that. But just wanted to.
And I would imagine as well that, and this may have been something that was actually pointed out previously, I don't recall, but just from a practical perspective, that there seemed to be less value to Centervale to having the entrance there, particularly coming from the south, because their signage is further up the road. So
Right.
unless you had a unified signage plan, which kind of takes things to a whole other level,
And I think they
Doesn't
still,
add as much
because
value.
you've got that little wooded patch in there, and because this will be a little lower than Centervale, it still wouldn't visually draw you to this as being the entrance. You're still going to want to go up the hill to get to Centervale. And I think that's one of the aspects that we looked at.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the other factors, I think the most critical movement, or the hardest movement from in or out of Centervale today is a left out. So that's a big factor in
Right.
the direction of this one-way, is it's hardest to take a left out from a safety perspective
I
and a
think
time
it's
perspective.
very similar to making a left out of the Dunkin' Donuts, which can be a little bit of an adventure, so.
So a signal helps that
Yep.
tremendously.
Absolutely. So I also am with my fellow board members, and I think we're all not only in support generally of where we are at this point, but just to be clear that we're kind of coalescing in support of option one in terms of the overall layout and circulation, with the understanding that that there will be some details to work out in terms of specifics of the layout and some of those usual site plan considerations. I think it's great that, obviously, that we'll have things aligned with Hanover Drive. That should be a good setup. And I commend the applicant for coordinating with the abutting property owner, and particularly under the specific circumstances of the last planning board meeting that you were able to huddle after that, I think was great, and make use of that time. I should point out, I don't think we have any folks here tonight, but this is an item, given where we are in the process, where we do provide the opportunity for public comment. So it's not a formal public hearing, but if anyone from the public would like to speak, this would be the opportunity. All right. Seeing none. Unless there's any further planning board discussion, I would like to make a motion that we approve the master plan for Biddeford Savings Bank at 206 US Route 1 for option 1.
Second.
Have a second, all in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next step.
What's your next step, if I don't mind asking? I mean, what's your time schedule here?
After this, we'll be looking at setting up a pre-application meeting with DEP. Once we get that material together, after the pre-application, that would normally be 2 or 3 weeks, we'll submit to them. They may take 2 or 3 months to process the application, but in the meantime, and so that time doesn't lapse too much, we will be back in to you folks. Just whether it's a formal application or not, we'll be in to show you what we've submitted to DEP, and just to keep you informed of the process in case that lags. Tends to lag a little time and people kind of forget, lose a little memory of the project. So we'll try and get back in at Mike and Charles's suggestion to keep you informed of what's going on.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Item number 7,
Thank you.
Ram Management Company Inc. requests site plan amendment review for construction of a 6,200 square foot office building at 200 US Route 1. Jay?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a continuation of our discussion at the board's last meeting regarding the development of this site. The applicant is proposing the addition of about a 16,000 square foot building to the existing Centervale site, sort of the back side of the building. The applicant actually began their discussion with the board back in December, so they've been through a couple of rounds of staff comments and board comments and have largely addressed many of staff's concerns. Sort of the remaining two elements out there are site access, which we just talked a little bit about. And when the applicant has understandably, is certainly through their discussions with the board indicated willingness to work with the abutting property owner, but understandably wants to be able to have an approval that will stand alone, provided the abutting property doesn't develop for some time. Not that we foresee that happening, but one never knows. So they've provided the board with two site plans, so to speak, sheet 2 and 2A. Here's what we can do to stand on our own, and a proposal as to how the cross-connection could work. The one question we had was, in their proposal with the cross-connection, they had or I should say, as their standalone project, they proposed converting their existing westerly Route 1 access way into a right-in, right-out with sort of a delta island in the middle, and proposed that once the connection gets made with the abutting property, they turn that into a right-in only. We sort of question if it might not make sense just to make it a right-in only at this time, whereas the applicant wouldn't have to later go in and sort of go through the cost and expense and time of sort of tearing up an improvement that might otherwise be made. And so I've shared that point with the applicant, and I'm sure he's prepared to speak to that. Let's see, site design provided a memo where they had one fairly minor comment left regarding one location of potential snow storage and potential adverse impacts it may have on porous pavement. So that's a minor note change that could be made with a subsequent package. So that sort of leaves where the applicant has talked about, right now they don't have a tenant for the building, and so architecture and signage aren't finalized. However, certainly the applicant has provided, as we see before us here, and it's in your packets, a rendering, a framework for what the architecture of the structure might look like. Well coordinated, it appears, with the existing building. And so a question that staff would have, should the board be comfortable moving forward, would be what level of review, again, recognizing the framework that's established for this application, would the board like to see for future final approvals of the architecture signage? Would that be something the board would be comfortable with planning staff dealing with, or is that something you'd like to come back to this board? I guess with all that, I think as we mentioned last time, we have received the applicant's DEP permit. So staff has drafted a motion for the board to consider with a series of conditions. And with that, I turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jay. And I will welcome the applicant.
Thank you. My name is Howard Goldenfarb, and I am president of Ram Management Company, owner of the property. I don't believe this rendering is in your package since it was done at about 3:15, finished at 3:15. So this is slightly different, and the difference is that this is ready for presentation in terms of leasing. The changes that were made from the previous one were that there was an error in the design of the windows on the last rendering, which showed them as somewhat different because they were single pane underneath the multi-pane windows that we have currently, and that's been changed. The windows will be the same as we have currently in Centervale Farm. Shows the shutters that we have, which weren't shown before. And by all means, we would agree to whatever notes you want to put on any conditional approval, that the windows would be the same as they currently are. With regard to the entrance and exit, which is the primary discussion, I think it's highly unlikely that we will build first before the bank. The bank is ready to go. They are their tenant. With regard to the other building, I don't know where they stand with that, but my guess is that very shortly after they're granted all of their approvals, they'll be in the ground. We have committed that we will go ahead with the plan if we build our other building. And I say if, because in order to build the other building, we need to, in today's world, pre-lease a substantial portion of it. We're confident we will, but there's no guarantee we will. So my guess is that they will be in the ground and perhaps not open, but close to opening before we start construction. So we're committing, once we start construction on our property, to go ahead with the connector road, go ahead with the right-in only. My guess is, and Tom is not here, but my guess is that no matter how you mark that connector road, some people are going to come in and some people are going to go out. It's just a reality if there's no one blocking it. But it does primarily serve, since I go home south of the site and I go out onto US 1 and take a left, it will help a great deal for traffic going onto US 1 south. Other than that, we hope that we'll get final approval tonight so we can start on the next phase of this project, and prepared to answer any other questions that you might have.
Thanks. Excuse me, thank you. Carrie?
I thank you for the changes that you made with the sidewalk and other things to bring it up to our standards. I really appreciate that.
I'm not sure what the standards are again with regard to the sidewalk, so we're agreeing to abide by the town standards, but I've yet to see exactly what those are. I believe, and you can help me in this, that it's asphalt from, in some sections of Scarborough, am I correct, along US 1? And concrete in other areas? Or is that uncertain?
The more contemporary sidewalks the town's been installing over the last 5 to 7 years have been concrete, given its durability, et cetera, but
Which is what we would prefer.
Yeah. Historically, actually, when DOT did a widening of Route 1 and some improvements, they did do asphalt on the other side of Route 1. So the more dated sidewalks along Route 1 are bituminous.
But you would want concrete, okay, which is what we would want to put in.
And I appreciate the saving tree plan and things. I appreciate all those things that you've responded to. I have no issue with final architecture and signage being approved by planning staff, and I have no questions.
Thanks, Carrie. Ron?
Yeah, thank you for finally bending on the sidewalk. And I guess my only question, Howard, is you need our approval so that you can go with your plans to a potential tenant. Is that correct? As opposed, I'm just trying to get straight, the horse before the cart or the cart before the horse.
To go out and market the property, you want to be able to say, we have approvals. If you just say, we're thinking of building this, then you're behind people who do have approvals. So being able to say, yes, we have DEP approvals, we have the town approvals, is important.
And I'm all for, I just wanted to get a little clarification in my mind as to your thinking, and I understand.
The fewer uncertainties, the better in today's world, and that certainly would be an uncertainty.
I understand that, but, I agree with, between the two of you, and thank you for meeting with them and vice versa. I appreciate that you guys took some advice from us and sat down and came up with the best possible solution under the circumstances. And I know that's a closed area, so I didn't have much to work with. And I think it's going to be kind of exciting to see more traffic coming in that general vicinity between, hopefully, your new medical building and the bank and a Starbucks. And the word has leaked out about Starbucks, so I've got everybody all over my back saying, get this thing going. But I have no problem whatsoever with staff making the final decisions on the architecture and the signage, and because I was already happy with the prior proposals that we have seen, and not putting my horse before the cart. I've known the work that Howard has done, and I have full confidence, so those are
Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff?
I think my colleagues have addressed everything and the other elements, that we're looking to leave to staff. I'm fine with, so I'm all set.
Thank you.
Thanks. Likewise, I'm I'm comfortable and prepared to vote for approval at this point. In terms of architecture, I'm fine with staff reviewing. This is a case where we have a known entity there. We know what that vernacular is, and we've got a pretty good indication of where you're headed in terms of design, so I wouldn't anticipate any surprises. So, and staff has indicated that they're comfortable with fulfilling that role, so we'll go ahead and delegate that to them. With that,
Can I ask a clarifying question? Just based on a conversation we had, I've crafted one of the conditions of the, is it your intent to, at this point, build the, again, recognizing that the likely scenario is you'll be the second one building, but is it your hope to get final approval of your standalone site plan with just the right-in from Route 1, or are you looking to maintain the Delta Island with the right-in, right-out? No, we had talked about that.
No, I would, it's a good question, but in quickly, I think we would show it the way it's ultimately going to be, because by the time we build the building, it's already going to be clear as to how it's going to be done, because we're committing to that, and we're committing to the connector next door.
Okay. Yeah, I just asked that question because I have a condition to
Yep.
that effect, which asks for a revised plan, so I just want to be sure. Yeah, thank you for that. Besides that, I think all these other conditions are fairly,
so we're not striking any conditions?
Nope.
All right, with that, I would make a motion to approve RAM management site plan approval. Slightly redundant, but. Excuse me. Move that the planning board approve the application of RAM Management Company Incorporated, represented by Teague & Bond under Chapter 405, the Town of Scarborough zoning ordinance, and Chapter 405B, the Town of Scarborough site plan review ordinance, with the following findings and conditions. Findings. RAM Management proposes to develop a 3-story, 16,200 square foot office building on property located at 200 U.S. Route 1, which is identified on the Town of Scarborough tax maps as map U44, lot 15. The site is currently developed with a 3-story multi-use structure and associated infrastructure improvements. The property is located within the TVC zoning district. The Planning Board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design of the site plan adequately addresses the site plan review ordinance requirements for site utilization and layout, internal vehicular movement, pedestrian ways, landscaping, stormwater management, lighting, utilities, and storage. Conditions. Number 1. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the site plan sheet shall be revised to address the following. First, revise Western Route 1 access drive as a right-in-only approach as depicted on sheet C2A. Second, address the snow storage area identified in site design memo dated March 5th, 2013. Condition number 2. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the final design of the architectural plan shall be reviewed and approved by planning staff. Plans are to be consistent with the general framework depicted on the plans dated January 18th, 2013. Number 3. Prior to the issuance of a sign permit, the freestanding sign shall be reviewed and approved by the planning staff. Any such sign shall be coordinated with the site's architectural elements. Number 4. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall pay traffic impact fees totaling $44,973.28. Number 5. Prior to the issuance of the building permit, the applicant shall execute the maintenance agreement as required by the post-construction stormwater infrastructure management ordinance. And number 6. Construction of the proposed connector road, generally along the proposed alignment as depicted on sheet C2A, is a condition of approval that is to be built when the adjacent site is developed.
Jay, may I ask, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
on number 6, this is something Jay and I discussed. As I'm reading it, perhaps you can correct me, this says that regardless of whether we build our building or not, if they build the adjacent site, I need to build a connector road, which is not my understanding, so am I?
No, that's not the intent of the way this is
Okay.
written. You have your occupancies for your existing
Right,
building. It's
okay.
like any other of these site improvements. We can't make you do them.
Yep.
If you don't do them within a year or when, whenever the site plan approval expires, then they've expired, so.
Understand.
yes.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, do we have a second? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 8. Scarborough Property Holdings LLC requests site plan review for mixed-use development at the corner of Payne Road and Ginn Road.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see, again, this is an item that the board has seen a few times at this point. It was subject, or is subject to a plan development review, so we've been through the site inventory and master plan review processes. In fact, the board actually had granted a master plan amendment to the site. So this is, I think, your second official site plan review, though we've seen it many times. Let's see, so the applicant has again revised their plans and submitted responses to many of staff's previous comments as well as the board's previous comments. And really, as far as outstanding issues, just have a few questions on some of the details on the subdivision plan. Trying to be sure that all the appropriate easements and standard notes are adequately addressed on the plan. Also have a question regarding the potential right-of-way widening as depicted on the site plan. Just be sure that the final lot layout is coordinated with the DOT's ultimate traffic movement permit, which has yet to be issued. So just want to understand a little bit about that. Let's see. Basically, there's just a couple remaining items when the board last saw this application. One had to do with site access. You remember we spoke quite a bit about the access off Payne Road, and the applicant had provided a revised plan shifting that Payne Road access further towards the Higas intersection, which staff was generally comfortable with. And now, having had time to review the plans, and our peer reviewer, Tom Gorel, having had time to review the plans, we're comfortable with that alignment. Tom Gorel did suggest exploring the feasibility of reducing the right-in from the proposed 20 feet to 14 feet, and to see if that would be feasible. One of the issues that board members had raised specifically during our last review was once folks came into the site, board members really wanted to understand sort of the traffic flow as folks entered into the site, and some board members expressed concerns that there may be a number of points of conflict there that particularly with sort of the drive-through and potential for accessing the gas canopies from basically the east and west, or either side of the canopy. So one of the responses that the applicants provided was regarding the use of the drive-through, recognizing that the tenant that they've sort of premised the restaurant side of the development on sort of has a lower turnover in their drive-through. That's sort of an important element, recognizing that that restaurant tenant, as the applicant has indicated, isn't finalized yet. And so, the final design of that driveway or design of that restaurant area may ultimately change if it's a different tenant. And so, maybe as a, that's an element, that drive-through element, maybe one the board wants to remain as a condition moving forward should you get to a final approval, just recognizing that the use and impacts of that may change. Another element that we spent a bit of time talking about had to do with the design standards, more specifically around the canopy. I think, the convenience store was pretty well vetted by the board, and obviously we haven't seen any details of the restaurant yet, so spent a bit of time talking about the canopy and how it met with the performance standards of the zoning ordinance and the design standards for a pitch roof, and the applicant has made strides towards meeting those requirements, and for the board to consider. One of the items that I think we need to talk specifically about is the design standards prohibit the use of lighting around the sides of the canopy, and the applicant has proposed lights there, so I think that element needs to be more fully vetted, as well as signage. The applicant had provided a previous, with their previous submission, some freestanding signs that staff identified weren't meeting the design standards. call for freestanding signs to be trimmed and detailed to complement the existing buildings. Really calls for them to have similar geometric shapes, easy for me to say, colors and forms. And in their response, the applicant has indicated that the signs will reflect consistency with the convenience store, but we haven't seen renderings to that effect, so that's just an item that, again, I think could use a little more vetting. Outside of that, should mention that we haven't, to date, we haven't seen their DOT permit or DEP permit. I did receive an email from, at the applicant's request, folks at the DEP suggested that it'd probably be about 2 weeks. There's basically 2 DEP permits they need. The sort of longer time, one's going to be probably issued, I think they said next week, and then the other one the following week. I haven't heard on the DOT timeline yet, but should also note that at the board's request, the applicant has come up with a phasing plan for the board to consider, again, recognizing that the restaurant site, there's no tenant for that site, but it is going to be cleared and graded, and so want to understand how that area would be treated. So they provided both a plan and a narrative as to what type of improvements they would do so that it would, present well from the public right away, so to speak. And I think staff's generally comfortable with that phasing plan. So I think those are sort of the major highlights of the staff comments, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jay. And I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, David Latulip with Scarborough Property Holdings, Inc. Tonight, we are seeking final approval. We've worked real hard to try to get as many of the questions answered. One of the questions that Jay brought up was the sign plan. We didn't get it back in time to submit it, but we have one today that I think really matches the spirit, and Mark Singelman will talk about that a little further. Just in the part of introduction is the architecture and how we try to treat this building. And one of the big pieces that we saw in the design standards, which is something we hold true to, is no national franchise, or the desire not to have a national franchise look. We've really put a lot of effort into creating this New England-style architecture with Priority Group and Naria, our master tenant. And we've created this to really be pleasing during the day and at night, so that it's something that stands out as fitting into these smaller New England towns. And as a background, this site, or this opportunity, came to us about a year ago when Scarborough was going through the long-range planning, and through the other process, we got a phone call and said, we've seen what you've done in Hollis, we've seen what you've done in Wiscasset, and these small coastal towns. This is what we're looking for in Scarborough. And so that's when we came to Scarborough. It was basically people from the community saying, this is the type of look we want. So we're pleased with that, and we put a lot of effort in. Your design standards are really stringent, and we're trying to really satisfy those. As far as circulation, DOT in that respect has really helped us by allowing us to move the control of access over, which really cleaned up a lot of things. We're really comfortable where it aligns with the two uses. So now it's really clean as you come in. It's even made the off-site improvements a lot simpler. Why we don't have to have the right-of-way, and Steve will talk about that. At one time, it looked like we needed to give a little bit of right-of-way to DOT. We don't need to do that. We can work within the existing right-of-way. And it further pushes the small opening for the neighbors across the street, but it really doesn't allow any extra movements other than them to get in and out of their driveway. So from a safety perspective and a traffic perspective, I don't say this often, but DOT actually helped us out in making the site work better. So that's worked out well. On the permitting side, we spoke with Derek Olson from DOT. The permit has been written. It's sitting on Steve Landry's desk for signature. We're hoping to get it today for the meeting, but he says it's, within a day or two, because it's already been written and agreed upon. And similar with DEP, they have everything. It's just in the process of being written up, so we'll have that wrapped up. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Steve Bushy to answer a few of Jay's questions on the site plan. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Bushy from DeLuca Hoffman Associates, Senior Engineer. I've appeared before you folks now a couple of times. Just wanted to go over briefly a couple of the items on the subdivision plan, which Jay had referenced, and then I can talk for a moment just on the site plan and give you a couple more details, and hopefully segue into Mark Sengelman giving some information and background on some of the architectural pieces. So, on the subdivision plan, staff comments related to the broader subdivision piece with Ginn Road here, Payne Road. This property, our property here, was part of a larger subdivision that goes back quite a period of time, 30 years or so. And what we've had Titcomb Associates do is prepare this amended subdivision plan, principally because we've got this little triangular wedge of property that we're acquiring for our stormwater systems, and that is part of this lot here that is owned by 4-Star LLC, which is part of the whole R.C. Moore complex. Our property here that is being acquired will be subdivided into 2 additional lots. Just for a moment on the permitting side of things, for clarity, we've got with the DEP 3 different permits that are taking place. We've got a transfer order that's being approved, and that's the first permit order that right now the DEP has said today will probably be signed by the end of this week, and that is for the transfer of this wedge of land, which is covered already under an existing site law permit order that covered the broader piece of property. Our piece of property was not covered under that site law order, but because we are acquiring about 1/4 of an acre of it, we have to do a transfer for that. The second element of the DEP's review is the modification to that site law order for this broader piece, and again, only because we're acquiring a piece here, so we had to do a modification for that, so that's step 2. And then the third step, which is really the principal piece for our piece of property, is we qualify for a stormwater permit, and that has been reviewed. We used the Cumberland County Soils and Water Conservation folks to assist with the review process, and they did their sign-off a little over a week ago or so. And so it's now in the hands of a staff analyst at DEP, and he has to basically do a write-up on that, and he has told us, as of today, that's probably going to be signed sometime next week. So that's our status on the DEP side. I guess I can convey we look good at this point in time, that there aren't any holdups or otherwise on DEP side of things. We've gotten sign off on the stormwater, which from my perspective was probably the bigger piece of the permitting review on the DEP side. Then to the staff questions on the subdivision piece, we had Jay's recommendations for a couple of notes to be added to the plan. And this plan that I'm showing here today, which unfortunately was not one that I was able to provide you, but I made the changes that were being recommended by staff, or I should say Titcomb Associates made the changes that were being recommended by staff, and that is we added a couple of notes to the drawing. And I'm just going to grab the plan and I'll read them directly to you so you know that they're on the drawing now. The notes that were added, one specifically referenced easements, cross-access easements, and so forth. So the note that we had chose to put here on the drawing, and this was as reviewed with our legal counsel and so forth, basically reads, all cross easements between proposed lots B1 and B2 shall be identified within an easements, covenants, and restrictions agreement to be recorded at the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds, and as further identified in a proposed site plan to be approved by the Scarborough Planning Board and recorded at the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds. Second note that we have shown on here, which was also added to our site plan notes, which is the Scarborough post-construction note, the standard note. Post-construction note project is subject to the requirements of the town of Scarborough, post-construction stormwater infrastructure management ordinance, and so forth, which is all just the standard town language. So we have now added that to the subdivision plan as well as to our site plan. Then I think the next comment on the subdivision plan was just identifying the limit of the control of access. We had a note here that Titcomb had provided which said DOT control of access, and then we just added the exact location where that was as identified on the DOT's drawings. So to a couple of the pieces and elements on the site plan, the last at the last meeting, we had a fair amount of discussion, as you recall, on this driveway entrance, and David just referenced the location of this entrance here with the assistance of the DOT. They said that they would allow us to put this right-in, right-out entrance somewhat closer to the Hyagus intersection, so we moved it from an earlier location. So when we went through the master plan process with you folks and then our earlier site plans, we had this right-in, right-out entrance somewhat closer here to the Ginn Road side. Now we've been able to move it so it aligns right straight with this central drive aisle separating the two properties. And the prime benefit of that is that we have this raised island that will be extended out and along here. We do have a small break in the island right here where I'm pointing out because it lines up opposite an existing residential driveway across the street. So we need to maintain access for that. But because of the length of this, and as well, and I think I outlined some of this at the last meeting, the outcome of the traffic study prepared by Bill Brave, Traffic Solutions, which has been reviewed and from my perspective, reviewed and approved by the division engineer here locally, allows us to create this island and as well minimize the amount of off-site improvements that we're going to need to do here along Payne Road. So we have a left-hand turn lane. That's the primary piece of off-site infrastructure improvement that we're doing. There's no left-hand turn today. I guess there's no specific designated lane for a left-hand turn into Ginn Road. What we have are 2 lanes today. We're going to add this 3rd lane for the left-hand turns into Ginn Road. But because of this island, it effectively stops anybody from taking a left to get into here, as well as turning left potentially out of our driveway. So this is just a right-in, right-out. Now, one of the things that are shown on this particular drawing, which has been shared and is an outcome of the DOT's review, their engineer also had a question about the width here on this driveway and drive aisle, I should call it, here in front of the restaurant. As you recall, our earlier plans had a 14-foot wide one-way drive aisle going from basically left to right here around the restaurant. The Scarborough Fire Department had requested that that be a wider route so that they could allow their vehicles, their emergency vehicles, to come to the front of the store basically and be able to park and be able to swing their ladder out to the top of the building and so forth. And so they wanted to have a 20-foot wide width. Well, then the traffic folks, so we're trying to solve a lot of different people looking at the plan, they were concerned about that width, and the means of trying to solve that little dilemma is that we've put on here some striping patterns, hatching patterns, both at the entrance coming in off of Payne Road as well at the mouth of this road, so it narrows it down visually, and will provide that along with signage to maintain this as a one-way traffic pattern, yet it will remain wide enough for the fire trucks to be able to put out their outriggers and so forth from their vehicles. Both Derek Olson and Steve Landry have reviewed this and are okay with it on the DOT side, and I've shared this with Tom Gorel via email, and he too said that he was satisfied as to addressing his comments about that width. So,
What about the fire department?
the fire department, this remains the 20-foot wide, which was satisfied them.
Right, okay.
Yep. So that's kind of the key piece there, and we think we've simplified a lot of this, and as Jay had commented as to our responses to your comments when we talked about this here at the last meeting, and that is on this exiting lane from the drive-through. And we basically just broke it down to the number of vehicles that are actually using that lane and that movement. It's very infrequent. It's going to be, at best, probably just one vehicle every couple of minutes. And so we talked that through with Bill Bray, certainly, as our traffic consultant. And given the distance and the visibility and ability to be able to see oncoming vehicles here, we felt comfortable. We've got a stop-controlled situation, so somebody comes out of the restaurant drive-through, they pull up, they stop, they're able to look left and right and be able to avoid any oncoming traffic, and either be able to turn right, go out this direction, to turn left and go northbound, or ideally, they can come out and just slip out the right turn lane and on they go southbound. So we've had lots of people look at it from the traffic side of things, and we feel comfortable now that everybody's been satisfied as to that movement and the layout here with circulation patterns and so forth. I'll point out again that our primary entrance here off of Ginn Road is located at the kind of the far end of our property, and the one waiver request that we're looking at for driveway separation is located with this driveway. Next to this driveway, we're less than the standard width, so we are asking a waiver for that particular element. And then we were asking for additional parking, as I discussed at the last meeting. Finally, on this plan, as I'm showing you here, and this again goes back to the subdivision plan, Jay made a comment about what we had represented here. There was a moment in time, period of time, when our earlier plans showed the widening of Payne Road, and that was before the completion of our traffic impact study. And for a period of time, we thought that we were going to need to be widening Payne Road along our site frontage. And so our earlier plans had suggested that there might be some widening of the right-of-way here. And as it has turned out now, we're not going to need to do that. And our subdivision plan didn't show any right-of-way widening, and we're comfortable that that's going to be the case. Site plan had continued to show that. This plan has been modified, so we basically eliminated that line. But as far as we're concerned right now, without having completed our off-site road designs, which usually the process is kind of a two-step process. We have to get our traffic movement permit in place, and we're near that. And then what ends up happening is that the developer signs a developer state agreement and goes through a separate off-site roadway design process. But that always follows after the traffic movement permit has been issued. But right now, we're comfortable that the off-site road improvements here along Payne Road will all be able to be accomplished within the right-of-way. So we're not going to need to do any adjustments, we believe, at this point in time with the subdivision plan on that end of things. And finally, on the site plan here, we're showing the landscaping pieces, and going back to our last meeting, we talked about some of the layering comments that have been set forth by staff, and we think we have done that well enough now. We've provided some revised landscaping that we presented to you at the last plan and then submitted in our latest package to you folks. To the last comment from staff about just the labeling, and we've cleaned up some of that labeling just to make sure it was clear as to what types of plants were being shown and identified here along the frontage. We've done that, but this is the same plant layout that we provided at the last meeting and then provided in your current site plan packages before you. And we think that addresses much of the issues on landscaping. And I'll reiterate the discussion that we went through at the last meeting about interior parking lot landscaping coverage, and we provided you some evidence to that effect that we felt we had met the 15% standard, and in fact we're about 19% on landscape coverage. So feeling all, I guess, good about those pieces of things. I'll note that we did appear before the Scarborough Sanitary District here several weeks ago and got their approval for the sanitary connections. As you recall, we have a sanitary connection for the C-store out to Payne Road, another one for the restaurant out to Ginn Road, and then we're extending and connecting a subsurface wastewater disposal system that currently serves this building here with 4-Star. We're going to provide a sewer extension and service out to Ginn Road for them, and the sewer district has approved all of that, so we're in good shape as far as that's concerned. So those are the key elements, I think, on the site plan piece, and I'll let Martin talk about some of the architectural stuff.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just, for a point of clarification on the site plan before we get into the architecture, because I wasn't able to flip through the sheets, when you were describing the revisions you made to the one-way 20-foot access road in front of the restaurant, you were sort of talking about some modest adjustments you had made in there. Were you referencing improvements or amendments that were on this plan set, or ones that you've done subsequent to submitting this plan set?
Subsequent, I'm sure I should have clarified
So
that.
the board
yes.
and staff hasn't seen those then?
That's correct.
Okay.
I got those last Wednesday from
Okay.
Derek Olson.
I
That
just
was
wanted to be
his-
clear. It sounded
Yeah.
like you were describing something I hadn't seen, and I
Sure.
just wanted to be sure that the board recognizes that.
Yeah, just to clarify, that is some striping here along the entrance to narrow that up,
Yeah.
and then similarly along here to narrow that up, and then over here as well to narrow that, so that there is a perception that there's a narrower drive there that promotes the one-way movement, but yet we still wanted to maintain the 20-foot width in here because we need to have that for the fire trucks to be able to pull in, and that seemed to be the median ground to satisfy kind of the traffic side of things as well as the fire department.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. That's where I got confused.
I think I'll stand over here. I'm Mark Singelman with Alpha Architects of Portland. Nice to be back in front of you again. We worked very hard on the redesign of the canopy so that we could make it more compatible with the existing C-store prototype that we've developed. As David indicated, we're very proud of this, and we feel like it's a very unique to Maine and with a New England style. So this prototype doesn't exist anywhere outside of Maine, and we feel like it's going to be a real boost for your town. And as such, we tried to make the canopy work with that, and we looked at the Cumberland Farms example, and I've got two canopies illustrated here. One with a variation in a roof line and one with a flat roof line. We like the lighter touch, the one that you could see through a little more. They both feature a 16-foot wide gable here on the front. However, this one has a hip roof that's visible from all four sides. And we feel architecturally it's much more interesting and more compatible, also lets you see through to the architecture of the building behind. We also, in your packet, there were illustrations of the fuel island canopy for the diesel fuel in the back. I didn't bring one of those to illustrate, but I'm sure you've had a chance to review that.
Excuse me, I was looking for that, and somehow, I think maybe I missed it. Can you tell me what number it's on?
That one. This is the
Oh,
one
that's
I'm
the back one,
referring
okay.
to.
Sheet E2.
Okay. I've got that then, okay, let's make sure. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. The other major, the other major alteration that we made was we have moved these columns for the fuel canopies from the inside to the outside. And as you can see in this illustration here, they do a very nice job of masking the end of the fuel pumps. I did hand out a couple of photographs of our Wiscasset location, and I think you'll find that the lighting on those these pictures really capture the lighting quite nicely. You can see that it's a very light touch. It's not a brightly illuminated project at all. In fact, once you step out, if you look at that second picture of the front of the building, once you step out from underneath that canopy, you'll see that asphalt is quite dark there. So we have the minimum amount of lighting for safety. We want to be safe under the canopy. We want to be safe getting in and out of the buildings. But we don't want to just blast this with a lot of light. That way we can have the contrast that is so attractive on the front of the building with the small lights over the fabric awning, etc. We do have some indirect lighting, and it's also very well illustrated in those photos on this color band on the edge of the canopies. So that's illuminated from the inside and creates a little bit of uplight to illuminate the yellow. But those are earth tones. You know, yellow and red are natural colors. They're not neon or very bright. And we feel confident that these meet the standard. Finally, in your packet tonight, you'll see a illustration of or the handout, I should say, the pylon sign. And I think you'll agree with me that meets the standard. It's got a pitched roof on it to match the building. The roof shingles match the building. It's got wooden painted trim detailing to match the building. It's got some nice gray panels on the side. And it has now been reduced, as the chair indicated last time we met, that it was previously 17 feet, and we reduced it to the maximum allowable 16 feet. So with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to my fellow board members, I just want to say at the outset that, or just remind folks that, you know, it's typically been the policy of the board that we don't grant final approvals when we don't have DEP or DOT permits in hand. It certainly sounds like you're on the right track, and that'll happen soon. And what I would suggest is that if the board gets to the point where, you know, it seems to be collectively okay with things generally, for lack of a better way to put it, that we might set that up as a consent item, maybe do a preliminary subdivision approval tonight, and then set that up as a consent item for next time, or the next meeting, at which point that you have those permits in hand, and then we can do final subdivision and then site plan approval. And then that would obviously give you some time to clean up whatever loose ends there may be after tonight. So I just want to sort of put that out there so everyone's working from hopefully the right level of expectation. But I wouldn't think that, from what I'm hearing about the timetable for the permits, that would really add much, if any, net time to your process. And we do want to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, and both agencies said it's done, it's approved, it's in process.
Great.
It's just sitting. We actually thought you would get them.
Okay. Well, good. I hope you do get them soon. Let's start with Jeff.
I got to ask some standards questions, I guess, from which you knew was going to probably be coming. I'm assuming that the roof lines now meet our requirement for the hip roofing and the angle, correct? For the
The performance standards talk about canopies having
Yes.
a pitched roof, and I think they've come quite a distance from where we were, certainly.
Okay. My next question is something about lighting on the canopies.
Yes, that's a design standard. The statement is something to the effect of, I think I don't know if I directly quote up in here, but design standards state that lights shall not be mounted on the sides or top of canopies. And so that is one we need to address.
So your yellow and red band are lit, or are they lit from underneath with the spotlights?
They're internally illuminated. So the yellow is an indirect light. It's, imagine if this is the face of the canopy.
Yes, it would be
It's
this
very like this cove lighting.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
That does not meet the design standards.
So that's my first comment.
Can I, one comment on that, because we've given that a lot of thought, we saw that in the standard. One was real specific about having what we call internally illuminated, so you have the lexan and then the light right on it. What the benefit of having that little glow is it allows us to pull the under canopy lights in, so it actually, it gives a little safety glow around, but we can put less lighting, and it just gives a nice ambiance more than, if you don't have it, then you're a little weak on the foot candles for safety, so we have to pull the under canopy out lights a little further. So yes, it adds an architectural feel, but it also allows us to make a a better feel what you see in the pictures.
I don't know how we get out around our standards, gentlemen. All right, so that's something you're gonna have to take a look at, because often I am flexible, but on this one, I'm not gonna be. It's a requirement. You've got to address it somehow, all right? The storefront or the sign that goes out at the perimeter sign, I'm assuming that meets the standards now, correct? Since the footage has been reduced in size, so that it meets our 16-foot versus 17-foot, the pylon sign?
Correct. Yep.
And I would say, yes, the architecture's been improved. It definitely tends to match the building. The gas pumps out back, I'm assuming the light and red band are lit out there, so that's something you got to address out there, too.
That's
okay?
correct.
The view from Payne Road, I think with the lower hip roof, you get to see the design of the building out back, so I tend to be more in favor of that versus the higher pitched roof. The traffic improvements that you've made, if you've made, DOT happy and our experts, it's why we have experts that we look to for opinion, then I'm not gonna quarrel over that.
I think we're out of traffic engineers.
The canopy, what did you say the canopy was made out of? No, the canopy in the front of the building?
The fabric awning?
Fabric canopy, that was
Yeah.
the answer I was looking for, okay? Because that's another issue that we have, is canopies are supposed to be fabric and not solid material, so that will meet our design standards. I know I'm usually the one that's flexible, but in this case, we're gonna play by the rules. So you've got a couple things to address around lighting to fix that. Traffic pattern, I think you're all set with. The pylon sign, I think you're all set with. With your permits, once you've got them, I don't see a problem at this point, other than what I've covered, so good luck.
Was it fabric a problem, or?
Fabric is correct. You got that one right, guys, okay? So, with that, Mr. Chair, I'll thank you, staff, for your answering my questions.
All right, I'll change it up here. Carrie?
Thank you. I appreciate some of the changes that you made. I can accept the hip roof instead of the pitched roof. I have to say that I still don't like the pumps out front. They should be in the back, according to the standards. I totally agree that the canopy lighting has to be fixed. I appreciate the fabric canopy. I'm really happy that the traffic issues are much better than they were before. I totally agree that the convenience store is a very attractive convenience store. Absolutely. I still have, some issues with the lighting all around it, and the red and the yellow. And I know they're more natural than, say, blues or greens or whites or blacks, but that still, to me, is very jarring. And I wanted to check with Jay, there was one comment about the electronic sign, and they didn't have the black or the white or the...
Yeah, previously the gas prices were green and red, and they've
Okay.
changed that with the submission they made
I just
tonight.
wanted to make sure.
Yep.
I appreciate that change, too. So except for the lighting, and the fact that the pumps are still out in front, I like most everything else about the project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Ron?
Yeah, I got a few things, in addition to what's been discussed. The color that was just mentioned, is that arbitrary, or is that also a standard?
Which is that now? I'm sorry.
You had mentioned color,
For the
message board?
For
yes.
the message boards, that's a zoning ordinance requirement.
Okay,
That
so-
it can only be amber or, they've made that
All right.
change, yep.
Also, and some of you communicate, first of all, what's the hours of operation going to be of the convenience store and the gas station? Do you know?
I don't know officially, usually they close between 10 and 11.
Okay, so it's pretty, okay, so they're not going to be open all night.
I don't think so. If all of a sudden,
Just for the benefit of the record, yeah. Thank you.
because this is by the highway, if all of a sudden they're knocking on doors at 11, 12 o'clock at night, which I really doubt, because, I mean, you go by there right now, it's pretty quiet, so most likely it'll close around 9, 10 o'clock.
And what's the reflection of the lighting going to be for that house that is across the street?
We met the design standards, there'll be 0-foot candles at the street.
Okay, that's good. Now, your entrance on Payne Road, we've taken care of that. We've done a deal with the pitched roof, landscaping. One of the recommendations was on the MTA side, there'll also be some additional landscaping. Is that going to happen?
No, I think that we addressed this last meeting where there's a pretty big buffer there now, and that's right where our stormwater system is. And the only way that would happen is if the MTA really expands that interchange, and with the easy pass, that's probably unlikely.
Okay, I just want to know if anything had changed there. And you did mention this, but I want a clarification. The sewer systems are going to be separate, right?
Yeah, all three. And that's one of the benefits is currently the small building from 4-Star is by a private system. That's going to be hooked to a public system.
And one of the things also that was mentioned, I need a clarification, is right now the restaurant seems to be on an iffy basis. What are you going to do to that land in lieu of the fact that it may not definitely be, a restaurant built?
So we prepared an entire phasing plan. Jay helped us with that. We're going to clear the land, grade it, bring in it's fully documented, but we're going to stabilize the ground, put in the stormwater so it drains, and put all the perimeter landscaping along Payne and Ginn Road.
Okay. Question for staff. Let's assume the restaurant is not built right now and they do everything they say.
Yep.
And then somewhere along comes a restaurant. Do they have to come back to us?
Yeah, I think that's I'll say a yes. We haven't seen any architecture for the structure at this point at all. I think, I'll harken back a little bit to a previous applicant we saw with RAM Management, where though they don't have their full building and tenant set up, we have seen renderings and the framework for what that building's going to look like is set forth. Here, we don't have an architectural rendering, so yes, they would. I think one of the conditions of approval that staff will work when we do draft our conditions for the board, presumably at this point, looks like maybe for your next meeting, would be that architectural renderings come back to this board for consideration.
Because I definitely would want that. And then there was something about Ginn Road. Is there any changes that have to be made as far as, you made a comment about that originally Ginn Road had certain rights and so forth?
Maybe what you're referencing is originally this lot, as was discussed way back at the beginning of the presentation, was divided out in, I believe it was 1980, and there was a planning board condition of approval that all access be to this lot off of Ginn Road and no access from Payne Road. And that's been a discussion point this board's had through the master plan process, and has basically agreed that based on the sort of the existing characteristics and the proposed development, that a Payne Road right in, right out does make sense. So I believe that, is that the
Yeah,
the
do we have
question?
to do anything? No, I mean, there was a
No,
general...
that'll be noted. That's one of the notes that, that the applicant's subdivision has updated based on staff's prior round of comments. So yes, they have addressed that, I guess. To answer your question directly, they have addressed that.
Thank you.
Took me a while, Ron, to figure it out.
I just want to make sure we got all our Ts crossed and Is, so that when they come back for consent, that we don't have any loose particles. That's why I'm belaboring some of these points. And I think that's about all I had in my notes for the time being, so I pass to the chair.
Thanks, Ron. So as voiced by my fellow board members, I'm also happy with the access at this point. Appreciate all the work and revision that went into that, grinding up with a good configuration. and I agree it was fortunate that DOT was helpful in that regard. I don't think, among other things, I don't think there's probably a whole lot of appetite around town for more work on Payne Road, widening things, so that's a good outcome for sure. The phasing plan definitely looks good. I'm also okay with the hip roof, the architecture on the C-store. I have to also go along with my fellow board members on the canopy lighting, unfortunately for you, I guess, particularly to allude to, Carrie's statement a moment ago. I mean, we're already sort of being somewhat flexible, if you will, in terms of allowing the pumps to be along the front and at least somewhat visible from Payne Road. So given that, I think it's fair, if you will, to sort of draw a line in the sand on the lighting, and I would hope that you can work with staff as appropriate, or whoever else, and come up with another approach there. So beyond that, we've already sort of talked about some of the other loose ends and things to tackle going forward.
To address the lighting, why don't we'll take it off the plan now, so we'll just remove the lighting from that component. I mean, none of the board members are comfortable because of the design standards, so we'll adhere to that, and we'll just take it off.
Shell would have no problem with that?
It is a design standard. Well, they may, but that's...
Just trying to give you the heads up.
I understand. That's tomorrow's discussion. We will tell you that if you go see these properties at night, it's a different feeling. It's not a brightly lit. It has a nice, soft feel to it, and that is one of the features. But standards address it, so we'll look into it.
Okay, thanks.
Well, it may be one of those things, and this comes up once in a while, where looking at it's more of a global perspective, that the design standards do sometimes evolve over time, not devolve, evolve over time in recognition of changing technology and so forth. And so it may be that as this, if there's a sense that this type of lighting, generally speaking, is palatable and attractive, that at some point down the road, the standards may evolve to reflect that. But for now, those are the standards. So appreciate that.
I have a question. Is the prospective restaurant tenant definitely pulled out of the?
No.
Oh, so they're still in the ballgame.
They're opening 3 stores. It hasn't pulled out, but I would say yes.
Gotcha.
Ron's trying to get another newsworthy leak here.
No, I'm not. I'm being diplomatic.
All right. Are there any other planning board comments or any other comments or questions from the applicant? Go ahead.
I guess I've got the Mack family being 3 members there, and with the spring coming, and this is a fairly wet site, we're anxious to really get started. So what is the process from here? And we'd like to get as much done tonight as possible, so we're on a consent agenda and get this going, because they've been a very patient family, and what we want to...
Well, I'll defer to staff in terms of the overall process, assuming that we grant preliminary subdivision approval here in a minute.
Yeah, I think what we would look for is a revised set of plans, and maybe I can work with your engineer to get, one set of revised plans back to staff to review before submitting sort of the full package to the board, just so we can go over, touch on the remaining comments that you heard board members talk on tonight. There wasn't a great deal there necessarily.
Can I clarify? I didn't hear any if we took the lighting out. Is there any other open ones?
The permits, we definitely have.
No, the permits,
Yeah.
the 2 permits, and addressing the staff notes, which I think we will or have, and then the lighting. I just wanted to clarify.
Right, and, your engineer already referenced the fact that there's some adjustments made to the subdivision plan that staff hasn't
Yeah,
reviewed yet.
exactly.
Some
No, so
minor adjustments
perfect.
to the site plan that we haven't reviewed yet. So just, so we can take a look at those things, and so,
Great.
I think based on the board discussion here, I think we can work pretty closely with
Good.
Mr. Bushy to
Yeah.
get there once we have DOT and DEP in hand.
Okay, great.
Okay, so that
It sounds like a consent item on the next agenda, which, if you get state permits, so
Right.
if the board wants that, it wouldn't necessarily require a presentation by you. It could be open the agenda item, and if there's no discussion, move right to a draft
That'd
motion.
be,
Right, it's not as if we would need to see another round of renderings or anything like that.
that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, with that then, I will move that the board grant preliminary subdivision approval to Scarborough Property Holdings LLC for a mixed-use development at the corner of Payne and Ginn Road.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you next time. Item number 9 on our agenda, administrative amendment report.
I do not have anything to report at this time.
Thank you. Is there a town planner's report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to
We
provide
even
a
have our
couple...
town planner.
Thanks, great. A couple of updates. The Long Range Planning Committee thanks the Planning Board for the workshop a few meetings ago about the Crossroads District, and they continue to work on finalizing that zoning proposal. They have one more committee meeting in about 2 weeks, and I think at that meeting, they're going to finalize the proposal and forward it to the council. And the Crossroads, of course, is the Downs proposal coupled with some surrounding properties. So that continues to move in a positive direction. We also continue to work on the stormwater effort. As you remember, back in November, we had a good, productive workshop on some stormwater standards for Red Brook, and that takes a fair amount of consultant assistance, et cetera, but I just wanted to bring that up. I know the board was key participants in that workshop, and we continue to work on that and likely have a more refined outline for both the Planning Board and Long Range Planning Committee in a couple months. So that continues to evolve, and given the number of agenda items pertaining to Oak Hill on your agenda tonight, and then the approvals that you issued, I did want to highlight some town projects that are at least being proposed to the council for capital improvement projects. The Transportation Committee has been working hard on pedestrian improvements, some crosswalks, improved crosswalks at Oak Hill that might involve some refuge islands, so making Oak Hill a bit more friendlier intersection for pedestrians. Coupled with that, a sidewalk proposed along Black Point Road from Amato's all the way down to the Eastern Road and Eastern Trail. And so we have a concept design for that and pricing, and also sort of coupled with that, improved crosswalks of the Eastern Trail of Black Point Road and Pine Point Road. Right now, there is crosswalk striping and signage, but it's not nearly as obvious to motorists, and it doesn't necessarily put pedestrians on equal footing with motorists. So there's a proposal to put in some flashing actuated crossings there, to actually narrow both roads a little bit there, provide curbing and a bit more prominence for those crosswalks. So those are some things the council is going to be considering, both Finance Committee and full council during budget season, next few months. I just thought it was important for you to be up to date on that stuff as you're asking applicants to make sidewalk improvements that they are. The town is doing their part in that building a better overall pedestrian network, particularly in Oak Hill. So that seems to be moving in a good direction.
Thanks. On the topic of town budget and transportation or public works projects, are the funds for the Jasper Street improvements still on the radar or in the works?
Yep. The Jasper Street Town Improvement Project and Water Line Improvement Project, that was tabled for a number of years because Phase 2 hadn't happened of the Sea Ridge project, is back on the radar screen. We had a neighborhood meeting about a month ago with all the property owners along Jasper Street, and showed them a concept plan for an improved roadway, a sidewalk, the limits of the water line improvements. Got good response from them, and then now the design's being refined. So that is going to be a CIP on the council's, during the council's budget deliberations as well.
Okay, good, thank you.
Question for the planning staff. A while back, we talked about some type of a connector road, possibly from Running Hill to Gorham Road, coming in somewhere near the Nunsuch Golf Course. Whatever
Yeah.
happened with that process?
Well, that was a planning study, a transportation planning study that PACS funded, and we completed that recommended transportation improvement study, and recession occurred, and there hasn't been a lot of interest in new development, particularly that requires significant infrastructure, like sewer extension from the east side to the west side of the Maine Turnpike, and some pretty expensive road improvements. So the study still has the same recommendation to have a connector road that could serve new development and also provide a lot of commuter traffic benefit. And the property owner is still aware of that recommendation, but they're waiting for a major user that wants to develop on that side of the highway. So it's, I guess, one of those plans on the shelf that still could come to fruition. It's just timing's not right yet for growth to happen over there.
Thanks. Is there any planning board correspondence? All right. Planning board comments?
I have some.
All right, Carrie?
I would like to address the citizens of Scarborough, as this may be my only chance to ensure that you hear from me about what is happening with my position on this board. For those of you who do not know, the partial term I was appointed to fill on this board ended last December 31st. Because it takes the Town Council Appointments Committee a few months to formally fill the open positions after an election, people whose terms are up on town boards and committees act in their capacities even though their terms have expired. This past Saturday, I was informed by the chair of the Appointments Committee that I was not being reappointed to this board. This came as quite a surprise to me, as I had answered yes to the board chair's question regarding my desire to continue on the board, and I had specifically emailed the town clerk of this desire. And it was quite a surprise to the planning board chair and members and the town staff. To my knowledge, none of the planning board or staff had been consulted in any way by the Appointments Committee before they made this decision. Now, no one that I have talked to in town can even remember a time when someone who desired to continue in their volunteer capacity was not reappointed other than when they were term limited out. My research on this issue is in process, and when it is completed, I will report the results. I tried to think of why any members of the town council would not want me to be reappointed, and I read the applicable portions of the town charter and the administrative code and the town committees and boards manual and the town council rules, policies, and procedures manual. It could not be for lack of attendance, which is the only stated reason for removal from the planning board in any of the town regulations. Anyone who attends or watches the planning board meetings is aware of my exemplary attendance. And it could not be because I came to meetings unprepared. I have received a great deal of positive feedback about my work ethic and the type and quantity of questions I ask to ensure that I understand the issues and processes of the board's work. Now, many of you in the town may not be aware that when I was appointed to fill the partial term on this board, that I was not voted in unanimously by the town council. The Appointments Committee at that time was made up of Jessica Holbrook, Carol Rancourt, and was chaired by Ron Alquist. Applicants for the planning board were interviewed at that time by the committee, and Councilor Alquist had a concern that if appointed, I would come to the board with an expectation that I would try to change how the board operates and bring in new ideas in some form. This did not make any sense to me at the time because, as I explained to the committee, anyone serving on a town entity that has a fiduciary duty to uphold the town ordinances, policies, etc. I have a lot of experience in acting as a fiduciary, both indirectly and directly. I emphasized in my interview that it was a board member's duty to apply the processes, structures, regulations, and standards regardless of their own personal preferences. I also had a long conversation with Councilor Wood around this time about the planning board's history and operations in order to have a well-rounded knowledge of the requirements and time commitment when applying for an open seat. When the appointment list was brought to the town council at the February 16, 2011 town council meeting, Councilor Wood proposed that instead of the normal procedure, which was to vote on accepting the entire list of recommendations in a block, that they split them up and vote on them individually. The only discussion on any of the appointments was on my appointment to the planning board, and Councilor Richard Sullivan made specific comments on the fact that a gentleman who is a builder was being, quote, overlooked in the planning board nominations. The vote on my appointment was 6-1, with Councilor Sullivan casting the negative vote. So the only stated objection to my original appointment was that a builder was overlooked. And now I have been told by the chair of the appointments committee that a builder will replace me. I don't know the person who is going to replace me. I am sure he may be a very good board member. He and my colleague, Mr. Buffard, were voted in as assessment review board members together at the town council meeting on February 20th of this year. But I cannot find a requirement in any of the town's legal documents that planning board members should only be people in the building industry. Now, a few people have suggested to me that my recently highly vocal support for the town of Scarborough design standards and adhering to our town zoning and other requirements in general may have upset some of the council. That certainly does not make sense to me, because the town has worked for so many years to create regulations of all kinds, but especially design standards, to ensure that Scarborough has its own New England village style with quality, attractive buildings. Besides, the town council has the power to change the regulations and standards if they do not like them and do not want to see them enforced. Finally, the lack of my reappointment is not a done deal yet. The council will be presented with more appointments, I am assuming, in their next council meeting on March 20th. Until the time that the council votes in someone else into my current seat, I am fulfilling all the duties of a member of this board. In case this is my last planning board meeting for a while, I want to thank the council members who voted me into this seat, the planning staff, especially Jay Chase, Carol Logan, and Robin Doms, my fellow board members, Chair Alan Paul, and the public who have been supportive and appreciative of my work on the board. I have enjoyed learning even more about construction, traffic planning, and yes, even stormwater management in fulfilling my fiduciary duty to the town in this capacity. I can assure you that this will not be my last contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Obviously, I'm not privy to directly privy to any of the circumstances around this, but I would like to say that if this does turn out to be your last meeting, that thank you for your service, and enjoyed serving with you, and you'll be missed, and I hope that you do, if it does turn out that you cannot continue on the board, I hope that you do find other ways to contribute in town.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other planning board comments? I have a, excuse me, I want to make a couple comments on a different topic, partially just by way of update. I guess it was, well, I don't remember how many meetings ago it was. I think it was back in early January. I think it was the first meeting of this year. This board held a public hearing and provided an advisory opinion to the town council on proposed rezoning around Griffin Road in the Dunstan area. It was brought forward by Risbera Construction and had been, the Long Range Planning Committee had approved, had recommended approval. It essentially was to move the TVC district boundary back a little further toward Orchard Street, further off of Route 1. At that, I believe it was January 9th Planning Board, the board in the end, I think, although again, it was not a formal vote, the sort of straw poll, if you will, was, I think, 4-2, recommending against approving the rezoning. Now, I'll readily concede that if Chairman Paul, who is on LRPC and who is on record as having supported that change, if he were here, he presumably would have voted in favor of it. But that said, that was the advisory opinion that we sent up to the town council. Unfortunately, it came to my attention that at subsequent council meetings, it somehow was represented that the board had actually voted in favor of the rezoning. And I think it was just an honest case of miscommunication or misunderstanding. But, and Councilor Roy has since, I believe at the last council meeting, acknowledged that that was an error, and she apologized for that. And I certainly don't think there was any ill will there whatsoever, but I did just want to go on record as saying that it was unfortunate that our advisory opinion was not accurately translated, if you will.
They've overturned it. They've voted for that, as far as I know.
And just to be clear, and I think everyone was already aware of this, certainly the council is under no obligation whatsoever to abide by whatever we recommend. It's truly an advisory opinion. And they did, you're right, they did, I think there was only one dissenting vote. They did vote to, at least the council members who were there that night, voted to approve the rezoning. So the rezoning has taken place. And I certainly have no idea when an actual proposal will be coming forward, but that's, I guess that's sort of the update aspect of it, that we may be seeing that coming down the road at some point. And again, if that particular project doesn't move forward, in theory, any project that meets the requirements of the TVC, including non-residential uses, could potentially come before us. So just wanted to mention that, and that I hope that going forward we can, I don't know if there's a different mechanism than sort of just having the minutes of the planning board provided to the town council when there is an advisory opinion, just to make sure that the will of the board, if you will, is accurately represented. Again, acknowledging that it's not binding anyway, but I just wanted to put that out there. And that's in no way to diminish the efforts of LRPC or the council, but I just wanted to put that out there for the record.
Thank you for the update on that, by the way.
You're welcome. Are there any other comments? All right, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank you.